Good day, everybody. This is Marco Marinucci from Silicon Valley in California. I want, first of all, to welcome all the attendees and the participants of NextRise. It's a great pleasure to be part of the conference. We're clearly bummed that I was not be able to participate in person as was planned, but I'm sure we'll have other occasions to do that in the near future. I'm Marco Marinucci. I'm the founder and CEO of Mind the Bridge. And today we're going to talk about international innovation ecosystems. So the idea of the next few minutes is to give a sense of how the market of innovation is evolving over different hubs around the world, with a particular deep dive in some of our review of how South Korea is addressing the market of innovation and startups and scale-ups. And we shot some measures and comparative analysis with other ecosystems that we think can be of help with both the participants and the policymakers, as well as the operators, so scale-ups and corporates. So without further ado, I will start the presentation. This is what we are going to talk about. First of all, maybe a couple of words about us as an entity. Mind the Bridge is an innovation advisory firm. So we work with startups around the world and corporations, really to connect and create integration and deals. We do that. We've been doing this for the last 13 years. We have our headquarters in San Francisco, where we run our innovation center. Although we're very internationally focused, so since the beginning, we've always been a door both to Silicon Valley for scale-ups and startups around the world and corporates, as well as a bridge to other ecosystems around the world. So we do have offices that are in different locations, a few in Europe, in London, in Barcelona, in Milan, in Berlin, and we're actually extremely happy to take the opportunity of this conference to launch our newly established office, in fact, in South Korea. So very happy, very excited to be part of this very moment of the growth of an ecosystem of startups that is clearly making strides and results. And so as part of our activities in Korea, the first thing that we decided to do was to publish a well-detailed market study of our view of macro trends of what's happening in the world of startups and innovation in South Korea. And this is also driven, and the next few slides will be driven from also the work that we've been doing over the years into what we call the economy of innovations. As an advisory firm, we also publish reports. We're very data-driven. We think that without measuring advances, it's hard to give perspectives and to give suggestions to both policymakers, governments, and startups. And so we tend to study the market and the numbers and the trends as much as possible. And so some of our reports and some of our studies are a little bit more transactional. So if you see here on the right-hand side, we publish and study, for example, the latest 20,000 transactions of M&A between corporates and startups around the world, as well as we give a sense of the sizes of the markets of what we call scale-up. I'm going to then define scale-up shortly, but with different regions. And so those are some examples of some of the reports that were published in the last few months. One is on the tech scale-up in China. Another one is a scale-up, tech scale-up in Europe that we've been working on for with the new editions every year. And the third one that you see here is actually on the presence of innovation outposts from corporates from Japan in Silicon Valley. Again, just to give you a sense of where these data points that I'm showing are derived from. All these reports are free, so you can download it. Here I added a link directly on our website where you can download all these and the latest and the past reports that we produce. I'm going to talk about the major topics of our studies is always in the integration of the world of startups and the world of corporates. So just to set the level field, here we define open innovation as the kind of the father of the modern open innovation. Harry Chesborough, professor at Berkeley University here in the Valley, one of our frequent speakers. You see here pictures of one of our latest event that we hosted really defines open innovation. Is basically a paradigm that assumes the firm can and should be use external ideas to be innovative, not just purely relying on their own internal R&D, but really making sure that they incorporate really the open innovation, so from the outside in that can be integrated. So everything that drives our studies and numbers that we're going to show in the next few slides is really based on this concept of integration between the market of innovators, typically startups, tech innovative startups that are on a growth stage. On the other side, the market of different verticals, so different industries. Again, the open innovation models that we consider can be numerous. Here, this is just some examples of activities that can be measured, that I think are a good measurement of the integration and the maturity of markets of innovators integrated with the mature industry. So, from activities of acquisitions to investments to procurement. So, the detailed tracks for startups that corporates might have to integrate their technology, to the support of accelerators, to what, for example, these reports is all about. So trend spotting, so getting an understanding of how the market dynamics are evolving. This is, I think, the key point and the key slides of the presentation. So I'm going to spend a few minutes on that. Again, this is our proprietary view of how to measure an economy of innovation. I think there is not the only one, but that's our stub to it. We try to get a sense of not only the size of investments that are made in the world of startups, but also the maturity of how the startups and their ability to access capital. And that becomes even more relevant when this is compared not just among different regions, but as also this is compared over a period of time. So you can start seeing how this evolution of the outcome of these investments is impacting a specific region. On the right-hand side, all this data will be incorporated in our upcoming report that we'll be publishing soon. It's called Tech Scale Up South Korea, and done in association with Kita. Again, some of the data that I'm showing now is just a preview of this deep analysis, but just to get a good sense of what we're measuring and how South Korea is scoring as opposed to other central ecosystems of innovation. So a few definitions here. The 6 different rows represent the following. The first one is the number of scale-ups. Our definition of scale-ups, to remove all the noise of early stage startups, is startups that have raised at least $1 million. Okay, so that's the bar of where we start counting the number of scale-ups. The second line that you see here is what we call the number of scalers. Again, this is our internal definition. Instead of focusing purely of unicorns, here you see the sign of the unicorns. We consider unicorns not the best measurement of advancement. just because the definition of unicorns is a company evaluation of $1 billion plus. And we know that especially in this period of times, evaluation are very iffy. They're changing up and down very frequently. So what we base our counting here is in the amount of money raised. So typically this is money in the bank that we think is a stronger measurement of advancement of a company. So what we call the scalers. So the second row is companies that raise at least $100 million. The third line, what we call the super scalers, are companies that raised, so money raised in a bank of at least $1 billion. The fourth row that you see here is the total amount of capital raised by these companies. Pretty straightforward. The fifth one is what we call the scale-up investing ratio, and it's basically a measurement of what's the amount of funding that scale-up received based on the local economy of the geography that we're looking at. So it's really in proportion to their GDP of their country. And the last one is the proportion, what we call the scale-up density ratio. So it's a proportion of the number of scale-ups that are originated based on the population of an ecosystem. So with those measures, I think you can get a good sense of how different ecosystems compare. And in particular, clearly the leadership of Silicon Valley across the board, both in the number of new scale-ups being produced, to the total amount of capital that in a very little region is raised, almost $400 billion, as well. And this is probably the most relevant, what we call the investing ratio. So the amount of investment that happens based on the GDP of a region like Silicon Valley, you can see here is a staggering 74%. It's also interesting moving from right to left to see how the other ecosystems compare. And clearly Israel being the second region in terms of relevance in the concentration of outcome of success stories of innovation. So you can see the very high level also of density of scale-ups that come out of that. And then China, where the interesting piece is definitely the growing support to the ecosystem, the growing amount of funding. So that's interesting to see, especially if compared to the previous years. And US as a whole clearly is a larger ecosystems where some of the numbers are highly, if you see here, concentrated in Silicon Valley. Europe, whose numbers in general being a larger economy, are somewhat similar to South Korea. And now here we're going straight to South Korea. Again, some of these numbers are still work in progress, but we can definitely see how the ecosystem is today aggressively supporting, in particular from the top down, the growth of companies that we can call scalers, unicorns, or you name it. But companies and startups are definitely in the growth stage, while the investment ratio starts in being more interesting. So higher, if you see here, than Europe in a pretty similar density area. So those are very positive signs. That's the way that we're reading this data of an ecosystem that is aggressively growing. Now, I'm going to leave you with three messages of the macro trends that are happening. And I think is relevant because that also implies international movement of intellectual properties of companies and flow of capital. The first one is definitely the fact that there is more of an appetite of the large corporates looking for innovations to have a physical presence in those hubs of the innovation. So in particular, as you mentioned before, in Silicon Valley and Israel, they represent the two highly concentrated geographical areas where a lot of solutions tend to be located. So again, this is very quickly based on some data reports that are, again, you can find done from our website. But the interesting piece that is the concentration nowadays of a lot of Asian companies. So from the APAC region seems to be the most represented in terms of outpost of innovation of corporates, in this case in Silicon Valley, where very similar number with Israel as well. So 42% of the new number of outposts of corporates are putting somebody in Silicon Valley to look at how the market is progressing and sometimes do investments or filtering a solution. You're very highly now represented by companies that are coming from Asia. And those are, if you drill down the single countries, is actually staggering to see how, in this case, counting 275 outposts of a corporate innovation in Silicon Valley, Japan has the biggest share of that, with 72 corporates and 72 companies that do have an outpost in Silicon Valley. So 1 out of 4. And then if you go down here the list, the second one that is kind of still at a large gap is the United States. There are entities that are clearly not already in Silicon Valley, so from outside of Silicon Valley. And then you see a long list of other countries. Some are from Europe, so France and Germany are probably on top, and then China definitely being more present as in their aggressive proximity to where the innovation is created. And then you see here all the others. You can also see the presence of, in this case, of South Korea with just a few outposts, but with the ideas that also this is just counting the corporate presence. We're not counting also the presence of some agencies where I think South Korea is very highly and well represented. Again, here to go a little bit deeper, what kind of industries those corporates actually are representing, a little bit of everything. And so you can see here a long list. The top industry represented is automotive, and then all the others are pretty much all the industry are looking for solutions to aggressively integrate innovation in their business models. Some of those are conglomerates, and some of the newcomers are also in the consulting world and constructions. What is also interesting to understand is all this flow of corporates putting ahead of their outpost of innovation in Silicon Valley or in Israel is all happening now. So if you look at this chart, 6 out of 10 of the outposts are new. So we're located in the last 5 years, and 60 of them actually are representing corporate venture capital, so what we call the CVC. So it's definitely a trend that is happening and accelerating as we speak. That was the first message. The second message I want to leave you on, also in a comparative analysis of ecosystems, is something that sometimes it comes as a surprise or is underestimated. This is the reason why eventually the world of venture capital is very well developed in Silicon Valley in particular, is because of this very data. It's because of this is an economy where there's a lot of liquidity, and liquidity is generated by sometimes IPO. More generally speaking, is generated by acquisition. So this is just one chart. Again, it's kind of small, but what I wanted to show you is really the list of the companies that are doing most of acquisition across the world. And this is kind of changing over time. But if you see this list, what matters is that the flag that you see, the little icon, where it's pretty clear that out of the 30 most aggressive acquirers of startups, 22 are from US. So the vast majority, and if you see it from US, most of them are from Silicon Valley. So this is really a key point that makes this market particularly relevant and creates a cycle of investments that where the potential return is becomes very interesting. And so in return, more venture capital gets invested, more investment into startups, that creates more of an attraction of more startups coming here. But that's mainly driven by the ability of acquiring more often. The third and last message that I want to leave you on that we think is very relevant. We talked about the world of startups. We talked about the world of a corporation trying to be closer to the innovation outpost. The third one that we are tracking as part of the macro trend is that the integration between the corporates and startups is moving in different ages. That's how we call it. And the top line here of the message is that I think we started a few years ago where the main message to communicate was around marketing at the end of the day. So especially corporate investing in open innovation for what we call the age of marketing. So being associated with the fact of being an innovative company to be friendly with the world of startups. And so the KPIs, meaning the measurements of the success, were compatible with that very goal. And in this case, were PR, so communication and visibility and a number of initiatives. I think we moved, at least in the companies that have been working with the world of startups for the longest, to what we call the age of collaborations. And so the ability of really try to strike deals between, or partnership between corporates and startups. And so the measurement of that has become really the number of POCs, of proofs of concepts, so of trials of integrations, and sometimes if that also turns into investment, the number of investments as a measurable objective. We think, and this is also part of our study in the market that we are active on, is that now we're moving into the third stage that is probably the most difficult, but also is showing maturity of this integration. This again happens especially outside of a more mature market like Silicon Valley and Israel, and this is the age of return. And so corporates are starting looking at the final results of all these investments, really with what we call the return of investment and return on innovation. So the ROI measurements that is now pushed by top management to see what is eventually the impact of the investments that is done at a corporate level in the world of open innovation, both at the top line, so in the sales, more sales channels, and at the bottom line, so in better efficiency that gets integrated as a result of integration investments of acquisition of startups. So that's what we think is particularly relevant. We know that all these three I think messages have an impact also for the ecosystem in Korea. I'm going to leave you just with the contact information. As we said, we are extremely excited to be part of this very moment of the growth of an ecosystem that we're measuring now, and we see particularly positive signs. We see that the commitment from policymakers in South Korea is particularly visible and relevant, and measuring the effectiveness of those policies, I think, is pretty clear to see that results are coming, results both in terms of economical impact and also the quality of the throughput of that effort of pushing startups to bigger results. So with that, I'll leave you with again our information. We look forward to working with all of you, and feel free to download our reports, including the one about innovation in South Korea, in our website. Thank you.